Some time ago, there was an intriguing article about Easter in the Huffington Post religion section, how Easter and Passover can make your family happier. Well, we're all about happy families, so I got it out, I dusted it off, and it said that now is the season when tens of millions of people will do something so familiar that it's easy to forget how radical it is. Two faith traditions, it says, will commemorate the worst moments in their past. For the Jews, it's Passover, in which they relived their 4 centuries of slavery in Egypt. And for us, as Christians, it's Easter, part of which is the suffering and the death of Jesus. Of course, both of these stories have hope-filled endings. The Jews ultimately escape slavery and eventually make it to the Promised Land. And for us, the Easter story is one of resurrection and new life. Still, it says, the larger question is worth considering. Why are these stories, maybe in the very darkest of days, at the center of our faith stories? And their stunning answer to this question? These stories help us to be a people who can survive. And I would add, they help us to thrive and to be a people of resilience, of strength, and of hope. The author did a thorough research trying to figure out the secret for the strength in families. He talked to cutting-edge scholars, innovative brain researchers, and world leaders of business, sports, and religion, as well as countless everyday parents who struggle to find the time and energy to ask those really big questions in life. He found that children and adults who knew more about their family's history had a higher self-esteem, a stronger sense that they had some control in their lives, and a deeper belief that their family functioned well. Those who knew the stories from their family's past consistently displayed emotional health and happiness and proved to be more resilient. And it wasn't just the fun and the happy stories, but also included failures, setbacks, other painful times. You know, like the story of great-great-uncle Donnie, a brilliant surgeon in his day and the life of the party. He was loved by all. Daily, he also bravely struggled with bipolar disorder and got by, only with a lot of help from his friends and family. Then there was dear, sweet Grammy Lillian with a wicked sense of humor who could crack anyone up with her accurate rendition of a camel chewing a cud. Great-Grandpa Harry lost an arm in a farming accident at age 65 and continued to farm, including milking a whole herd of cows, even beyond his 80 years. Legend has it that even in his last years, he climbed up on the roof of the old 3-story farmhouse to do some repairs on the shingles with just one arm, and wearing a neck brace for broken vertebrae incurred in an auto accident. And then there was Uncle Sam, who as a 10-year-old spent countless hours playing basketball with his big brother. But not just any old basketball. Uncle Sam, who loved to dunk the ball, would position himself behind the backboard on top of the garage roof and hang over the backboard. His brother would feed him the ball, and Sam would stuff it, never missing a basket. One day, as he leaned into the backboard, the brackets gave way, and Sam broke both wrists as he landed on the macadam below. Performing tasks as simple as feeding himself were impossible because of the casts from fingertip to upper arm. He relied on help from his family just for basic hygiene. But the story isn't over. It was early spring, and the daffodils on the farm were just beginning to bloom, kind of like today. The day after his accident, Sam brought a big bouquet of daffodils into the farm kitchen as a gift to his mother. She was touched by the thoughtfulness until it dawned on her that the casts had barely had time to dry, and Uncle Sam had climbed a farm fence to pick the daffodils. You know, telling our stories is important, the good, the bad, and the ugly. The important factor seems to lie in a person's sense of being part of a larger family. It is discovering that they are part of a larger narrative. They have a strong sense of intergenerational self, and they know they belong to something bigger than themselves. And that's where religion comes in, according to the article. Meaning can be found in history. The sheer act of telling and retelling stories helps us to understand God's role in the world, as well as our own position in a long line of ancestors who were not so unlike us. When we tell the story, we are extending a line from our children and our children's children to their past. And our stories include not only positive moments, but moments of hardship and pain, and the resiliency and the hope that emerge in the face of those difficult times. You know, it's been a difficult year. When we think back to those early weeks of the pandemic, before we even knew to call it a pandemic, we were sure that we'd be back in our church building together by Easter. We just didn't know which Easter. Sitting with uncertainty is one of the most difficult things that we can do. Learning how to manage that certainty, that unknowing, is one of the best skills that can develop to foster mental wellness. There's a term emerging in psychology research called post-traumatic growth. It refers to the positive growth that comes after a period of psychological struggle and adversity. And we have been through and are still in a time of struggle and adversity. You know, this is a part of life. Inevitably, the world throws setbacks and roadblocks to all of us, and no one has escaped this one. We have been writing new narratives at this difficult time in our history. When racism reared its ugly head several months ago, many of us met virtually to read and discuss and to learn more. We were inspired to write an anti-racism statement unanimously affirmed by this congregation, and then we put it out there, a full page in the Lancaster newspaper. What conviction and courage. We found new ways to stay connected when we couldn't be together in person. We risked Zooming and live streaming and Facebook postings and more. And we even picked up the phone to call folks just to ask, how are you doing in this pandemic? Our deacons have made hundreds of calls just to help people stay connected. You know, everyday living has continued during this time. People we know and love have died. We have been separated during these life transitions, and yet we have sent hundreds of notes and cards to say, I care. We've taken countless meals to families upon the birth of a baby, an illness, or a hospitalization, or the loss of a loved one, all the while keeping safe distancing and masking. There are countless other stories that we are compelled to tell, not only coming out of the pandemic, but far, far into the future. We will remember. We need one another to tell those stories, to extend the line, and to find ourselves a part of that larger narrative. Let's revisit the Easter resurrection story, our story, and also the story of Mary and Peter. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. So she ran and went to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and said to them, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." Then Peter and the other disciple set out and went toward the tomb. The two were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent down to look in and saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he did not go in. Then Simon Peter came, following him, and went into the tomb. He saw the linen wrappings lying there, and the cloth that had been on Jesus' head, not lying with the linen wrappings, but rolled up in a place by itself. Then the other disciple who reached the tomb first also went in, and he saw and believed, for as yet they did not understand the scripture that he must rise from the dead. Then the disciples returned to their homes, but Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb, and she saw 2 angels in white, sitting where the body of Jesus had been lying, one at the head and the other at the feet. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." When she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Do not hold on to me, because I have not yet ascended to the Father. But go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord." And she told them that he had said these things to her. You know, they were on their way. There was no happily ever after promised to them. They didn't yet have the rest of the story. They had never heard of Easter. A risen Savior wasn't even on their radar. They had no foresight of the angelic beings or an empty tomb. There was no high, holy, and spiritual trip they were making. These were sojourners, Mary and Peter, compelled by hearts that ached with grief and separation. Alone, Mary had come to mourn a loss. She longed for a body to touch and to bid goodbye. She came out of a deep need to be where Jesus was. Partly, she came to convince herself that it was really true. How unbelievably difficult to lose a person whose life had so dramatically impacted yours, who has shown you the grander meaning of things, and who has shown you your place at the center of it. It is hard to lose someone so cherished, an extraordinary man who woke you up from the pettiness of every day and led you beyond yourself. Someone who said that you are not merely a convenience. You are the beloved. And Peter joined in some kind of boyish foot race to Jesus' tomb after he had spent the past few days running the other direction, away from Jesus. Maybe he was feeling so guilty that he could hardly wait to say that he's sorry for denying Jesus after boasting about his loyalty, for not being present at the most important time, for not being there for Jesus when the chips were down. Maybe he was jealous of the other disciple, the favorite, the faithful, beloved disciple. Maybe he harbored petty resentment for others who seemed to have so much more, to be more blessed by God, for those who were full of confidence and joy, not the gut-wrenching guilt and shame that Peter felt. Whatever thoughts, whatever feelings consumed their hearts and their minds, Mary and Peter were on their way, early in the day, before even a beam of sun streaked across the sky, separate sojourners at different places on the same road. They both knew that Joseph of Arimathea and Nicodemus had taken the body of their beloved Rabboni and had placed him in a cave, into a new tomb, and as was the custom, had sealed it with a stone, a very big stone, which they knew stood in their way. There was no doubt that that stone would be a major hurdle. And maybe here is where we too can draw a line extending from Mary and Peter to us. For we too are sojourners on the road, and we too know about stones. We have our own stones in our path. Every one of us has a stone story to tell. The stone of pain and illness and grief grips our heart. The stone of failure and loneliness fills our spirit. The stone of wayward children, of restless spouses, keeps us awake at night, staring at the ceiling, a knot in our stomach. The stone of drugs and alcohol imprisons our families and our communities. The stone of diminishing strength and aging limitations holds us in its grasp. The stone of racism, sexism, classism, and every other ism blocks our path at every turn. The stone of meaninglessness and helplessness looms large. The stone of violence around us and around our world leaves us fearful. The stone of exclusion and separation saddens our hearts. But that is not the end of the journey for Mary and Peter, and it's not the end of our journey. When Mary arrived, she saw the stone had been rolled away. And when Peter heard the news and arrived, he too found the stone had been rolled away. And Jesus was not in the tomb, neither was he gone. His mission was among the living, to whom he appeared in new and glorious form, not once, but 4 times in the Gospel of John. And every time he came to his friends, they became stronger, wiser, kinder, more daring, people of resilience, of strength, and of hope. And every time he came to them, they became more like him. And this morning, this Easter morning, we remember that the stone is now gone. Jesus is not in the tomb, but he is not gone. In new and glorious form, he is with us. Jesus' mission is among the living, and each time we encounter Jesus, just as with Mary, he calls us by name. He is calling us to a new creation, an unimaginable future, which is only the beginning of an ongoing revelation of what resurrection and new life and its implications might mean. Every time we encounter Jesus, we too become stronger, wiser, kinder, and more daring. We become more like Jesus. And our early morning darkness gives way to light. Death and evil do not have the last words. Jesus is alive in new and glorious form. And each time we encounter him, we remember that we are part of a larger narrative, a narrative that is about peace, justice, mercy, reconciliation, enlightenment, transformation, service, and openness to all. And that together we can move mountains, banish fear, love our enemies, and change the world. So rise and shine, brothers and sisters. It is a new year, a new day, a new dawn. Christ is risen. Christ is risen indeed.